September 14, 2024, 9 a.m., Federal Courthouse, Miami, Florida. Nicolas Maduro sat in an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed, facing a jury of 12 Americans. The charges: narco-terrorism, conspiracy, money laundering, crimes against humanity. If convicted, he'd spend the rest of his life in prison. The prosecutor stood up and said 6 words that made Maduro's blood run cold. "Your Honor, we call Cilia Flores." The night before the trial, Maduro couldn't sleep. His cell at the federal detention center was cold, sterile, nothing like the presidential palace he'd occupied for 11 years. No silk sheets, no servants, no power, just concrete walls and the sound of other prisoners shouting through the night. His court-appointed lawyer, a public defender named James Morrison, no relation to the CIA officer, had visited him the previous afternoon with final preparation. "They have everything, Nicholas," Morrison had said bluntly. He'd stopped using formal titles weeks ago. "Bank records, witness testimony, intercepted communications, your wife's confession. The best we can do is try for a plea deal." "No deal," Maduro had said firmly. "I will face them, I will tell my truth." "Your truth won't matter if the jury believes their evidence. Then I'll make them doubt the evidence." Morrison had sighed. "You're not on trial in Venezuela anymore. You can't just declare yourself innocent and have it be so. This is America. Evidence matters. Facts matter." Now, sitting in the holding cell beneath the courthouse, Maduro wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. That's when everything changed. The door opened. A U.S. Marshal entered. "Time to go." Maduro stood up. His legs felt weak. How many times had he sentenced others to prison? How many political prisoners had stood where he was standing now? Karma, he thought. This is karma. The marshal led him through corridors and upstairs. Finally, 2 large wooden doors. Through them, he could hear voices. A crowd. The doors opened. The courtroom was packed. Media in the gallery. Victims' families in the front rows. Venezuelan exiles wearing opposition flags. And at the prosecution table, a team of 6 lawyers from the Department of Justice. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Ana Ruth Chen, looked up as Maduro entered. "Mr. Maduro," she said formally, "please take your seat at the defense table." Maduro sat. Morrison sat beside him. On the table in front of them, folders of evidence, legal pads, and a single bottle of water. Across the aisle, the prosecution team looked like an army prepared for war. "But you haven't seen the biggest surprise yet," Judge Chen addressed the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here today for the trial of Nicolas Maduro Moros. The defendant faces charges of narco-terrorism conspiracy, international cocaine trafficking, and related firearms offenses." She turned to the prosecution. "The United States may present its opening statement." A woman stood up. Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Dawson, late 40s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for never losing a case. "Thank you, Your Honor." She walked toward the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. "Ladies and gentlemen, for over a decade, the defendant sitting behind me ran one of the largest drug trafficking operations in the Western Hemisphere. Not as a criminal hiding in the shadows, but as the president of Venezuela, using his entire government as a cover for cocaine smuggling." She paused, letting that sink in. "The evidence will show that Nicolas Maduro personally authorized shipments of cocaine totaling over 250 tons. That's 250,000 kilograms. That's 550 million individual doses of cocaine flooding American streets." One juror visibly gasped. "The evidence will show that he worked directly with the Sinaloa cartel, the FARC rebels, and Hezbollah to move drugs through Venezuela into the United States. That he took payments totaling hundreds of millions of dollars. That he used Venezuelan military aircraft to transport cocaine." Dawson walked to her table and picked up a photograph. She showed it to the jury. It depicted a Venezuelan military plane with bales of cocaine stacked inside. This photograph was taken by a DIA informant in 2019. "That's a Venezuelan Air Force plane. That's cocaine worth $40 million on the street. And that shipment was personally approved by the defendant." "Wait a minute, don't miss this detail." Dawson returned to face the jury. "Over the next 2 weeks, you will hear from witnesses who worked inside Maduro's government. Who transported his drugs, who laundered his money, who watched him turn a nation into a criminal enterprise. You will hear from his own wife, who handled the financial arrangements." Maduro's hands clenched into fists under the table. "You will hear from DIA agents who intercepted his communications, FBI forensic accountants who tracked his money, and you will hear from the families of Americans who died from overdoses, cocaine that came through Maduro's network." She walked back to the jury box. At the end of this trial, the evidence will be overwhelming. And I will stand before you again and ask you to return the only verdict that justice demands: guilty. On all counts. She sat down. Judge Chen nodded. Defense, your opening statement. Morrison stood up slowly. He looked unprepared compared to Dawson's polished performance. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, the prosecution just painted a picture of a criminal mastermind. A drug lord operating from a presidential palace. But the reality is far more complex. He gestured to Maduro. Nicolas Maduro inherited a country in crisis. Economic collapse, political instability, external pressure from the United States. He made difficult decisions, some right, some wrong. But he was not running a drug cartel. Morrison walked toward the jury. The prosecution will show you evidence of drug trafficking through Venezuela. That's true. Venezuela is geographically positioned between cocaine-producing countries and the United States. Drugs flow through it, but flowing through is not the same as being organized by the president. They will show you money in offshore accounts. But those accounts were set up to protect assets during economic sanctions, not to hide drug profits. Several jurors looked skeptical. They will bring you witnesses. But many of these witnesses have deals with the prosecution. Reduced sentences, immunity, money. They have every reason to lie to save themselves. Morrison paused. I ask only that you listen to all the evidence. Consider the political motivations behind this prosecution. And remember that in America, we are innocent until proven guilty. Thank you. He sat down. Even Maduro could tell it was weak. Now what you're seeing is nothing. The United States calls its first witness, Dawson announced. DIA Special Agent Michael Torres, a man in his 40s, took the stand. He was sworn in. Agent Torres, Dawson began, can you tell the jury about your role in investigating Mr. Maduro? I've been investigating Venezuelan drug trafficking for 12 years. I was the lead agent on the Maduro task force starting in 2016. And what did your investigation reveal? That the Venezuelan government, under Maduro's leadership, was facilitating cocaine trafficking on a massive scale. We documented over 150 separate shipments between 2016 and 2020. How did you document these shipments? Through informants, intercepted communications, surveillance, and cooperation with international partners. Dawson pulled out a document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit 1 into evidence. Judge Chen examined it, admitted. Dawson showed the document to Torres. Can you identify this? That's an intercepted phone call between Nicolas Maduro and Diosdado Cabello, dated March 15, 2018. They're discussing a shipment of 2,000 kilograms of cocaine. Can you read the highlighted portion? Torres read. Maduro says, make sure the shipment gets through clean. We can't afford another seizure. The Mexicans are getting impatient. Cabello responds, don't worry, I've arranged military escort to the coast. No problems this time. The jury leaned forward, listening intently. Agent Torres, in your professional opinion, who was we in that conversation? The Venezuelan government, specifically, Maduro and his inner circle. Morrison stood up. Objection. Speculation. Sustained, Judge Chen said. The jury will disregard the witness's opinion. But the damage was done. The jury had heard it. You won't believe this, but... Dawson continued. Agent Torres, how many communications like this did you intercept? Over 200. Phone calls, encrypted messages, video conferences. All showing Maduro's direct involvement in coordinating drug shipments. And what was the total value of cocaine you documented moving through Maduro's network? Conservative estimate? $4.2 billion over 8 years. A murmur went through the courtroom. Judge Chen gavelled for silence. Thank you, Agent Torres. No further questions. Morrison stood for cross-examination. Agent Torres, these intercepted communications, were they obtained with Venezuelan government permission? No, they were obtained through U.S. intelligence operations. So, illegal surveillance of a foreign head of state? Legal under U.S. law with proper warrants. But not legal under Venezuelan law, correct? Objection, Dawson called. Relevance. I'm establishing the questionable legality of the evidence, Morrison argued. Overruled. But move on, counselor. Morrison tried a different angle. Agent Torres, you said you had informants. Were these informants paid? Some were. How much? That's classified. Were they offered immunity from prosecution? Some were, yes. So they had every reason to tell you what you wanted to hear? They were telling us the truth. In your opinion, but you can't know that for certain, can you? Torres shifted uncomfortably. We corroborated their information. With other paid informants? And with hard evidence. Morrison nodded. We'll see about that. No further question. Day 3 of the trial. The courtroom was even more packed than before. Word had spread that Cilia Flores would testify. The United States calls Cilia Flores. The door at the side of the courtroom opened. Cilia walked in, looking nothing like the first lady she'd once been. Simple gray dress, no jewelry, her hair pulled back plainly. She didn't look at Maduro as she took the stand. But Maduro couldn't look away from her. She was sworn in. Mrs. Flores, Dawson began gently, I know this is difficult. Take your time, thank you. Can you tell the jury your relationship to the defendant? I was married to Nicolas Maduro for 28 years. I served as Venezuela's First Lady from 2013 to 2024. And during that time, were you aware of drug trafficking operations? Cilia took a deep breath. Yes, I was aware, but the really shocking thing is, can you describe when you first learned about these operations? In 2014, Nicholas came home one evening and told me we needed to discuss alternative revenue sources. The oil money wasn't enough anymore. He said we needed to be pragmatic. What did he mean by alternative revenue sources? Drug trafficking. He said the military was already involved through the Cartel de los Soles. He wanted to expand operations and bring them under presidential control. And what was your reaction? Cilia's voice cracked. I objected. I told him it was wrong. That it betrayed everything Chavez had stood for. But he said we had no choice. That without money, we'd lose power. And losing power meant prison or death. Did you eventually agree to participate? Yes. To my shame, yes. I helped set up the financial structures. The offshore accounts. The shell companies. Dawson pulled out several bank documents. Are these the accounts you set up? Cilia examined them. Yes. Singapore, Switzerland, Dubai, Hong Kong. 7 different countries total. And how much money moved through these accounts? Over $3 billion between 2014 and 2024. The number hung in the air like an accusation. Mrs. Flores, was this money from drug trafficking? Some of it, maybe $800 million. The rest was from embezzled oil revenues, Chinese loans, and other corrupt schemes. Maduro couldn't stay silent. He stood up. You're lying. You're, Mr. Maduro. Judge Chen's voice cracked like a whip. Sit down immediately or you will be removed from this courtroom. Morrison pulled Maduro back into his seat, whispering urgently. Don't miss this detail. Dawson continued. Mrs. Flores, can you describe a specific instance where you witnessed the defendant approving a drug shipment? Cilia nodded. June 2017. We were at Miraflores Palace. Diosdado Cabello came to a private meeting. He told Nicholas that the Sinaloa cartel wanted to move 5,000 kilograms through Venezuela to Miami. They were offering $15 million for safe passage. And what did Mr. Maduro say? He asked about the risks. Diosdado said they'd use military aircraft, so the risks were minimal. Nicholas thought for maybe 30 seconds, then said, do it. But I want $20 million. They negotiated to $18 million. And did that shipment occur? Yes, I saw the payment receipt. $18 million deposited into one of our Panamanian accounts. Thank you, Mrs. Flores. Dawson sat down. Morrison stood for cross-examination. His strategy was to attack her credibility. Mrs. Flores, you're testifying against your husband to save yourself, correct? I'm testifying because it's the truth. But you have a cooperation agreement with the prosecution? Yes. In exchange for what? Immunity from prosecution and witness protection. So if you don't tell them what they want to hear, you go to prison? I'm telling the truth regardless of my agreement. Are you? Or are you a woman scorned, taking revenge on a husband who blamed you for crimes? Cilia's eyes flashed with anger. I'm taking responsibility for my own crimes and his. There's a difference. Morrison pressed. You claim to have set up these financial structures. Isn't it more likely that you were the criminal mastermind and you're now blaming your husband? No, Nicholas controlled everything. I was just the administrator. But you had access to all the accounts. You made all the transfers. How do we know you didn't steal this money yourself? Because the evidence shows otherwise. The communications, the witnesses, the timeline, it all points to Nicholas. Morrison tried a few more angles but Cilia didn't waver. Finally, he sat down, defeated. Day 7 of the trial brought the most damning witness yet. The United States calls General Vladimir Padrino. Maduro's former defense minister walked into the courtroom in handcuffs. He'd been arrested months earlier and offered a deal. Testify against Maduro, and get 20 years instead of life. He'd taken the deal. Padrino was sworn in. He still looked like a general, even in prison clothes. Straight posture, hard eyes. General Padrino, Dawson began. You served as Venezuela's defense minister from 2014 to 2024. Is that correct? Yes. And in that role, were you aware of drug trafficking through Venezuela? I wasn't just aware, I was in charge of it. A shocked murmur went through the courtroom. Can you explain? Padrino looked directly at the jury. President Maduro ordered me to create a military drug trafficking organization. We called it the Cartel de los Soles because the high-ranking officers wore sun insignias on their uniforms. When did this organization begin? Informally, it existed before Maduro. But in 2015, Maduro made it official policy. He called a secret meeting with all top generals. He told us the country needed revenue and drug trafficking was the fastest way to get it. That's when everything changed. And how did the operation work? The Colombian cartels would bring cocaine to the Venezuelan border. Our military would provide protection and transportation. We'd use military bases as storage facilities, military aircraft to move the drugs, military personnel to guard shipments. In exchange, we took a percentage. How much? Usually 30% of the wholesale value. Sometimes more. And where did that money go? 10% to the officers involved. 10% to operational costs. The remaining 80% went to Maduro's presidential fund. His presidential fund? That's what he called it. Really, it was just offshore accounts controlled by him and his wife. Dawson showed Padrino a photograph. Do you recognize this? Yes. That's me with Maduro and Diosdado Cabello at a military base in Zulia State. We were overseeing a shipment of 8,000 kilograms. And this photograph was taken when? September 2019. What happened to that shipment? It was loaded onto a military cargo plane and flown to Honduras. From there, the Sinaloa cartel took over and moved it to the United States. Dawson entered the photo as evidence, then continued. General Padrino, in your time running these operations, how many people died as a result? Padrino's expression darkened. I don't know exact numbers. Drug trafficking is violent. People got killed. Informants, rival traffickers, people who knew too much. Maybe hundreds, maybe more. Did President Maduro know about these deaths? He ordered some of them personally. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. Can you give an example? In 2017, a mid-level officer threatened to expose the operation unless he got a bigger cut. Maduro told me directly, make him disappear. We found the officer's body in the jungle 2 weeks later. And you're certain this order came from Maduro? I was in the room when he said it. I recorded the conversation. The courtroom exploded. Judge Chen gavelled for order. Dawson pulled out a small recording device. Your Honor, I'd like to play that recording for the jury. Morrison objected strenuously, but Judge Chen allowed it. The recording played. Maduro's voice, speaking Spanish, translated by an interpreter in real time. This officer, what's his name, Rodriguez? He's becoming a problem. He's greedy. Greedy men talk. Padrino's voice. What do you want me to do? Maduro. Make him disappear. Quietly. No body. No evidence. Just, gone. Padrino. Understood. The jury sat in stunned silence. When the recording ended, Dawson said, no further questions. Morrison's cross-examination was desperate. General Padrino, you're testifying to save yourself from a life sentence, correct? I'm testifying because what we did was wrong. But you participated in all of it. You ran the drug operation. Under Maduro's orders. Or you're blaming him to save yourself. I have recordings, documents, evidence. I'm not making this up. Morrison tried to poke holes in the timeline, question the recording's authenticity, suggest Padrino was lying. But the general's testimony was too detailed, too corroborated by other evidence. When Morrison sat down, he looked defeated. Now what you're seeing is nothing. Day 10 of the trial. The prosecution shifted strategy. The United States calls Maria Herrera. An older Venezuelan woman took the stand. She was the mother from the interrogation, the one who'd lost her son in the protests. But today, she wasn't here about political violence. She was here about drugs. Mrs. Herrera, Dawson said gently, can you tell the jury about your daughter, Elena? Maria's voice was steady but filled with pain. Elena was 23 years old. She was studying nursing. She had her whole life ahead of her. What happened to Elena? She died of a cocaine overdose in 2019. In Miami. She'd moved there to escape the crisis in Venezuela. And do you know where that cocaine came from? Morrison objected. Speculation. There's no way to trace specific drugs. Your Honor, Dawson interrupted, we have chemical analysis showing the cocaine came from a batch that moved through Venezuela in March 2019. A batch General Padrino testified about. Judge Chen allowed it. Maria continued. The police told me the cocaine was part of a Venezuelan shipment. That it came through routes controlled by Maduro's government. How did that make you feel? Maria looked directly at Maduro. He killed my daughter twice. First, he destroyed our country so she had to flee. Then his drug network provided the poison that killed her. He took both my children from me. Tears streamed down her face. Thank you, Mrs. Herrera, Dawson said quietly. No further questions. Morrison had no questions. What could he ask that wouldn't make things worse? 3 more families testified. American families. Parents who'd lost children to cocaine overdoses. Each one, the drugs traced back to Venezuelan shipments. Each one, Maduro's legacy written in grief. But the really shocking thing is, by the end of day 10, the prosecution rested its case. They'd presented 47 witnesses, 312 pieces of documentary evidence, recorded conversations, bank records, testimony from Maduro's own wife and defense minister, grieving families. The case against Nicolas Maduro was overwhelming.